Okay, so I'm making this video now while things are still kind of unresolved because I think it's important to actually say all this stuff while it's still unresolved. On Tuesday the 9th, I had an appointment with my psychiatrist to try and get a medical report. All of that part of the story is in another video. But also on that same day, I got a phone call from Emirates regarding my travel flights and my flight to get back to Australia. The call I received was Emirates telling me that the Australian government had upgraded my status to being classified as vulnerable traveller, and because of that, they were able to actually do more with my booking. So I had a flight booked for the 26th of March. I wanted earlier and I wanted to go to Melbourne, but the flight that I had for the 26th of March took me to Sydney, and that was the earliest that my travel agent had been able to find and book. But now that I had been given this upgrade, Emirates was giving me a phone call to say, we have these earlier flights that we can offer you directly. So he's called me about 5 p.m. on Tuesday night, just before the psychiatric appointment, and offered me this new flight set for the 17th of February. Now this was Tuesday the 9th of February that we were having this conversation, so it was only 8 days away. But at the time I had to explain, thank you for this, however, my carer, I can't travel without a carer, and my carer isn't in Malta yet. I need to touch base with him to see how quickly he can physically get to Malta to see if we could possibly use this flight or what the earliest possible flight we could actually get is. Obviously, I couldn't make a decision without my carer, so the guy turned around and said, look, it's cool, I'll give you a phone call tomorrow at about 1 p.m, and we can sort it out there, this tomorrow being Wednesday the 10th. In the meantime, he promised to look at other options to give me a range of things to choose from. After hanging up, I immediately contacted a friend of mine to try and get them to be physically present for the phone call the next day, and I gave my mother a call to try and make sure that she was awake in Australia so that I could try and have her in the call as well, her listening in and talking through my computer while I talked on the phone. So anyway, I went to the psychiatric appointment to try and get my medical report. That failed. That's all in the other video. At the end of that, after the appointment, I pretty much immediately had an episode which lasted several hours, and then when I came out of it, I ended up going to bed a couple hours after that, and I just had an absolutely terrible night of sleep. But that's fine. I wake up the next day, I check my emails, and lo and behold, I've got an email from the Australian High Commission, the consulate embassy here in Malta for Australia. And it reads, yesterday, we referred you both as vulnerable travellers. Today, we received advice that you have both been escalated to Qatar Airline, and they are aware of your preference to travel to Melbourne. If you're not aware, Emirates is an airline, and Qatar is an entirely different airline. I immediately spotted a problem here, so I sent an email back. Hello, Qatar is new. Would it take us from Malta to Melbourne? How does this affect the tickets we paid for to Emirates and Air Malta? Now, Air Malta is new to this conversation, so I'll explain it briefly. Pretty much no planes are coming directly to Malta. The Air Malta is one of the only airlines that is actually taking people out of Malta to major international cities, and then if I want to catch a flight with either Emirates or Qatar, I'd have to pick it up from one of these other major cities. So my tickets, as they stand at the moment, have first a flight with Air Malta and then a changeover to fly with Emirates. So to that question, they replied, if it's doable, you would need to seek a refund from Emirates. But as that takes forever, you may be able to each apply for loans towards new flight option. Then sent me a link for where I could apply for loans. Now, I had actually already applied for this loan, and for me, because I'm disabled, it would actually be a grant, not a loan. However, the maximum amount that I can receive from this loan grant is 2,000 Australian dollars. That only covers the cost of quarantine when I land. Like, there's the cost of the flights, and then when I land in Australia, I have to pay quarantine fees for the 2 weeks that I spend in hotel. This loan is not going to touch my flights at all. It is only helping for the quarantine stay. But now let's talk about the cost of those airlines. I've had to pay for 2 tickets, one for myself and one for my carer. Each ticket is $9,700. It is costing me almost $20,000 to return to Australia in March. And the Australian High Commission is now asking me to cancel those tickets without getting a refund and buy entirely new tickets with Qatar. I don't have any money left. Right now, I have 600 euros in my bank account. That's it. That's all my money. Everything else went to paying these tickets. I still haven't actually paid off all the tickets yet. The remainder of the tickets has actually been covered by my parents. So at this point, I've emailed that information to the Australian High Commission, letting them know I can't afford to buy new Qatar tickets. The only way that I'm going to be able to do this is if either they cover it somehow, if Qatar is quite generous at letting me fly, or if I'm able to get some kind of transfer from Emirates to Qatar, and that it's probably better if I can stick with Emirates because I don't think that those options are going to happen. So that was Wednesday morning. It's now technically Friday morning, it's past midnight, and I'm still waiting for a response to that email. Back to Wednesday. Remember I had been waiting on the callback from Emirates? Well, at this point I wasn't sure if I was going to get one, because if the Australian Embassy has contacted them, then maybe my flights have been cancelled. I don't know what's going on here anymore. 1 p.m. comes along, no call. Get to about 1:30 or so, and I decide, screw it, I'm going to call. So I grab my phone, find the number that I was called on by them originally, hit return call, and I wait and get through Emirates, and I have some difficulties and I actually have to call again. But I get through to customer service, and I ask them what is going on. To which they respond by saying, we have no record of anybody making this phone call to you. So I spend a significant part of the afternoon playing cat and mouse, trying to get a call back from someone who Emirates can't identify, trying to establish what is or isn't the case from Emirates, what my options even are, and just trying to sort out everything to do with this situation. I have no idea what's going on anymore. It's just like a massive cat and mouse game. Then at some point, I have an episode. So we get to Wednesday night. I have no idea what I'm doing. I've established that Emirates still seems to think that I've got flights booked for the 26th of March. Meanwhile, the Australian High Commission, last they said, was that they essentially want me to cancel those flights in order for me to go over to Qatar. However, they've asked me to wait for a call from Qatar, and I haven't received a call from Qatar. Meanwhile, I'm also talking to my carer to try and get them to come as early as possible so that whatever the hell is going on, we are actually able to deal with it. And that causes a whole lot of other issues on his end because he's still employed. So there are all of those issues as well going on. It's at about this point that I realize, wait a minute, it's the 10th of February. The flight that I have been offered is for the 17th of February. I have no idea what's going to be happening in the next few days. I'm going to pack my bags tonight. So I ended up spending late Wednesday evening packing my bags as if I could be leaving tomorrow. Short segue. There is another issue regarding flights and travel and carers and accommodation, all that sort of thing that's going on at the same time here. Many months ago, I started my Masters of Game Design at the University of Malta. And I had offered, way back when, to a couple of my classmates in Italy, that if they decided to move to Malta for semester 2, while they were looking for a more permanent place to stay, they could stay with me for a little while. Now, I had cleared this with my parents, because my parents have massive trust issues. I had cleared this with pretty much everybody under the sun. When I say I cleared this with everybody under the sun, I mean I have a slight problem, which is Centrelink in Australia, my disability pension. In the paperwork for the disability pension, it clearly states that Centrelink may consider you to be in a relationship with someone whether or not you consider yourself to be in a relationship with someone. And the list of questions that they have, very open to interpretation. Like things like, do you share the same bathroom? Does the person have access to your financial records? When you go out, do they know where you're going and do you have to keep them informed? And that sort of thing. And when you break that down, yeah, if they're staying with me and I'm disabled and they're acting in any capacity as my carer, answering yes to these questions could actually get them labeled as my partner because they're acting as my carer, and there's no part in the form that you can fill out saying, They are acting as my medical carer. So this comes into the next part of the story, which is why I had told them that, yeah, you can stay with me for just a few days. And it's because I couldn't offer them to stay long term. I couldn't offer it for them because of my parents' trust issues. Couldn't let them stay there for a long period because I didn't want to have to deal with the Centrelink situation, their assets being counted on top of my assets, and all of the mess that would cause. One of the two Italians is actually disabled themselves, and both their disability and my disability are kind of triggered by stress, which from a long-term perspective is probably going to cause some issues. And my place is also only a 2-bedroom apartment. It's technically 2.5-bedroom apartment, but the problem is that one of those beds belongs to my parents. This place is supposed to be a holiday home for them as much as it is an actual home for me. So they have some of their stuff here, they've got their trust issues, and speaking of trust issues, that trust was recently abused by one of my carers. I mentioned in a previous video that I had a massive falling out with one of my carers. Yeah, I'm not going to go into details on exactly what that was here and now, but suffice to say that definitely cemented those trust issues, especially with people who they thought they could trust, who are acting as carers. Add to all of that, that this offer for them to stay for a few days is now conflicting with the time where my carer for international travel is going to stay with me. So now not only did I have the standing offer for them to come and stay with me for a few days, now it was a 2-and-a-bit bedroom apartment being occupied by 4 people, and one of those bedrooms is kind of off limits because it's my parents' bedroom. So you can see how this is starting to look like a really big deal. Now, to cover this tangent off, not as big of a deal, like everybody involved is quite rational, quite sensible. The Italians had already figured out that they may have to spend time in an Airbnb, but the point is that all of this was going on at the same time. And I'd just like to go on a second tangent for a moment regarding long-term situations. The carer, the guy who's coming to act as my carer for travel, one of the reasons that he is able to come with me, and the reason that he's acting as my carer for travel, is because he wants to go to Australia himself for a few different reasons. His sister's having surgery. A couple of our mutual friends in Australia are getting married, so he wanted to be there for the wedding. He also wanted to go back, get a new job, and one of his friends actually has a place that he can move into when he arrives in Australia. So there's a certain amount of time, window of time, for which we can actually do flights and where things will and will not actually work between the two of us. So that has to be taken into account when we're planning these things as well. And the last thing that I want to bring up here is that remember how the flight was on the 17th of February that was being offered? Don't know when my carer can actually make it to Malta, like how early he can get there, but the original flight was for the 26th of March. There's one other important date to keep in mind, and that is the 22nd of February, because that is when uni starts up again. That is when the next semester of classes begin. So all of that is coming up and going to be overlapping onto each other and needs to be worked around each other, and it could be a massive mess, or it could be massively functional, it could be a massive mess, and I do not know what that is going to look like exactly at this stage. Anyway, so that was Wednesday night. The next part of this story begins on Thursday, so this is now the 11th of February. About 7:15 a.m, I get a phone call from Emirates, and it's the original guy, the guy who had promised to give me a call back. He apologised for not giving me a call back the day before, stuff had happened, and he said he's got 2 offers for me. One is the one on the 17th, but there's another one on the 20th of February. Now, by this point in time, my carer had established that the earliest he could possibly be in Malta was the 22nd of February. That was the earliest possible, and even that would be pushing it. So both of these options simply weren't actually workable. But I thanked him, gave him the updated information of, can we get something as close to about the 25th of February as possible, giving us time to sort ourselves out, to get COVID tested before we fly out and get the results of that COVID test before we fly out. But at this point, I'm actually quite glad. It confirms that yes, the tickets that we had for the 26th of March are, according to Emirates, still valid, and they are looking into options and trying to work with us. This is really positive. This is a really good sign. So a couple of hours later, I decide to give the Australian High Commission a phone call and just try and touch base there and find out what is going on their end. Now, the woman who I've been communicating with via email, she wasn't in that morning, she wasn't going to be in that day. But I did get in touch with a different woman who had access to all the email history and a few notes on their end, so I was able to ask some questions and kind of get some answers. And what she told me was that the reason that they wanted me to switch from Emirates to Qatar is because Emirates does not have any flights going to Australia. You know, the flights that I just said on the 17th, the 20th, and the flight that I had paid for on the 26th of March? Yeah, the Australian High Commission said none of those flights actually exist, that there are no flights heading to Australia, let alone heading to Melbourne, which is where I actually want to go. There are no flights from Emirates, according to the Australian High Commission. And so that's why they want me to switch to Qatar, so that I actually get to Australia. So I'm now sitting here with a few realizations. I have no idea what's actually going on, that I have no idea who's miscommunicating and or who's directly lying to me, and something else occurs to me at this point in time, which is, why are they talking to me? I have a travel agent. The flight to Emirates was booked with a travel agent. All of these people have got the contact details of my travel agent. It's my travel agent's job to deal with this stuff. And all of them have decided to directly contact me personally, not my travel agent, and not even my carer, whose contact details are also listed alongside mine. They're all contacting me. They're not even including these other people in the conversation. So my travel agent, who is in Australia, has been completely left out of this entire situation. And when I contacted my travel agent, I got an entirely different set of information. Essentially what they said was that, yeah, Emirates definitely has got flights going to Australia, but they're going to Sydney. They're not going to Melbourne, they're going to Sydney. So now I have information from Emirates that conflicts with the information from the High Commission that conflicts with the information from my travel agent. I really have no idea what's going on anymore. And in all of this, nobody's brought up Air Malta. Like, I've got no idea if I can even get the flights out of Malta rescheduled or rearranged, or if there are these earlier flights available for Air Malta. I'm pretty sure there are, but I've got no idea the details for that either. So now I've got these tickets that may or may not actually exist, that I've paid for, that may or may not actually be refundable, a travel agent who's been paid a lot of money to do a job that nobody is actually letting them do, a carer who is coming potentially a month and a half early from when we are actually leaving, a couple of Italians who were planning on coming and staying with me for a few days, but now we've got no certainty on exactly what the situation there is going to be, and on top of all of that, I'm still having problems with my psychiatrist. And they are the only medical professional I have who can cover my ass in this country. And on top of all of that, and on top of every single one of these things that is happening, I have gone from having an episode every 3 days to episodes every single day. I have missed several appointments, I've missed several important phone calls. I can't guarantee that I will be conscious for any number of consecutive hours on any given day, and in exactly 10 days from now, uni starts. So that's the currently unresolved story of what the hell is going on with my flights, and am I going to be able to leave this country, and am I completely bankrupt now, and what the hell are the next couple of months going to look like? I have no answers to any of these questions at this point in time, but hopefully something will be resolved, maybe today, maybe sometime next week. I have no idea. I really hope something comes out of today when I talk to the Australian High Commission again. In the meantime, thank you for listening.